Welcome, friends and fellow homebrewers, to a brew day. And today we're going to be brewing the Amber Waves Amber Ale. And as I mentioned, this is an easy amber ale for you to brew following the extract and specialty grains method, one which I discussed a little bit earlier, and I'll leave a link in the description to that video. Now we're going to start with preparation. Do not skip this step. Without preparation, you are going to have a very frustrating brew day. Okay, so here on the table, I've got a couple of things to show you. Just the sort of preparation you need before you start brewing. And we've got quite a few ingredients here. This little cup contains some weird stuff called Irish moss. Yeah, it's pretty weird, seaweed based. It's going to help us clarify the beer. I'll talk to you about it later. And we've got this little doohickey. It's a test tube. I like this one because it can, come apart. I like anything which can come apart like that. I'm going to toss it in the detergent solution I've got there in the fermenter. Detergent solution is made from sodium metasilicate. And also the base, I'm also going to put that in there. I've got some digital thermometers ready. I like using a couple during a brew day because one I need to keep sterilized, the other one I can be using. Brew bag, I'm going to get to that a little bit later. And we've got hops, some Chinook, lovely stuff, and some Cascade, which we're going to put into this brew. Don't forget your spray bottle. This is filled with no rinse sanitizer. And we've got some of our crystal malts, a pre-milled as you can see. If you bought yours unmulled, you can use a rolling pin or a wine bottle to just crush the grains. That's all you need to do. Have a couple of shot glasses handy, measure out your hops and place them in these in the order in which you're going to add them. There's some no rinse sanitizer. You can use any one as long as it's a brew specific one. Don't use any funny stuff. Just use things made for brewing, please. And that is our prep. Of course, center stage, our recipe. Let's not forget it. I will be giving you all a printout in the link in the description in the video, so don't worry. Right. Another very important part of prep, sanitization. And this is the little thing I like to call my sanitization station. In it is the fermenting bucket. I've got another container where I put all the little grommets and bits and pieces for the bubbler. Also all of it soaking in no rinse sanitizer. And soaking in the bucket we've got our bubbler and a mason jar for the yeast later. Got my spray bottle. And this is really just to spray. I'm going to spray the lid quickly. Just make sure everything is nicely covered and soaking in the no rinse sanitizer. And it's just going to keep all the nasty things away from our beer. Spray a little bit there just to make sure. Now we're getting into the steeping. That's the first stage. And I've already put 7 liters of brew water in here into my stock pot, kettle. And while we watch some gratuitous slow motion of me pouring in the last liter, maybe I can talk to you a little bit about water. You know, there's a lot of things to think about when we're brewing. Water is one of them. And there's lots to know and learn about water. It falls completely outside of this video. But what I really want to emphasize is to make sure you remove chlorine and chloramine from your brew water. That might mean that you need bottled water. I'm using bottled water for this brew today. Or you need to use a chlorine filter to remove the chlorine and chloramine. Chlorine can be removed easily through letting it stand or boiling water, but chloramine, that's not that easy. You've got to use a chlorine filter or, like I'm using here, bottled water. Okay, I'm going to measure the temperature. I've got the flame on now, and there's a digital reading. I want to get it to somewhere between 60 and 70. Sort of 65 would be ideal to 68. And why that temperature? Because we're going to steep our grains. And you need that sort of temperature for the grains to release the sugars and the flavors, which it's, vital for our brew. Okay, I think I might be there. Let's quickly check. And again, this is not one of the parts which needs to be exact. As long as it's above 60 and below 70. More importantly, below 70. Otherwise, we're going to extract tannins out of our grains. We don't want that. So I'm happy with that temperature. I'm going to turn off the flame now. We don't want any flame at the moment or any heat, direct heat, because the brew bag, which is made out of oil, is not exactly heat resistant. So if you're going to put it in with the flame on, it might burn. Okay, so just put in the foil bag nice and easy. Sort of turn it over the rim of the pot. You could use binder clips if you don't have a big bag like this one. Okay, let's get the grains in there. And those are two different kinds of crystal malt and black malt added for color. Right, and you can just see the, you know, lovely, lovely grains. Let me just go get something. I need a spoon. Now here I'm going to use a wooden spoon. And that's kind of important. And later on I'm going to use a metal slotted spoon, but here I'm using a wooden spoon because a metal spoon might tear the bag. You don't want that. And just make sure that the grains are fully hydrated. You don't need to be too vigorous in this stage. Looks pretty good. They're all mixed in. And pop on the lid. You want to keep the heat in. And just leave it there. Okay, so for half an hour. And now, half an hour later, we can really see that, you know, the grains have been steeping quite nicely. The temperature has really hardly changed, and the smell is delicious. Sort of caramel biscuit. Okay, and then collect your bag and lift it gently. Hover it over the pot. That's what we're going to do. We're just going to drain it naturally using good old gravity. Don't squeeze the bag. Okay? It's very tempting. Don't do it. Just let it drain until it's just sort of a drip drip, and then we're going to get rid of those grains. But just don't squeeze the bag because that can release tannins into our beer as well, which is never good. Just make sure you pop it into a bucket or something. Don't make a big mess because that's some sweet and sticky liquid. I'm just going to blend it all together a little bit. And at this stage, if you look at the color there, see that nice rich amber color? That's pretty much going to be the final color of the beer. And the reason for that is that dried malt extract isn't really very deep in color. It doesn't add a lot of color of its own. Okay, back with the lid just to get the temperature up to boiling. Okay, it's starting to get close to boiling now. And as soon as the liquid really starts boiling, or is just about to boil, we're going to switch off the heat. And now we're going to add our dried malt extract. And this stuff is fine, sticky powder, really. You want to add it a little bit at a time like this, okay? So just a little, let it sort of integrate. Please remember that the flame has to be off at this stage. Never ever add DME to boiling water. Okay, so the flame is off at this stage. A little bit more. And now I'm using my metal slotted spoon and I'm just trying to sort of remove the clumps. This stuff clumps dramatically. I mean, it is such a fine powder that even the steam from the water is starting to make it collect around the rim of my container there. I don't know if you see it. It's a mixing bowl. And yeah, I've got everything in just a little bit. Don't worry if some of it still clings to the mixing bowl. That's not going to make a big difference. And now you just want to make sure that you break up the clumps. So I'm trying here to sort of make sure there's not too many. I've got a big one there. But all you do is you just sort of maneuver it against the side of your kettle. And you break it up with your spoon. And that'll be all she wrote. Just don't have any large clumps before you start to boil again. Because that is going to affect the brew. And you may get this sort of a burnt sugar flavor. Which, unless you're making a Belgian beer, is often not what you want. Okay, so I think I've got all the clumps out. Still a little bit there. And mostly it will mix in pretty well. It's really not a difficult thing to work with. You've got a whole bunch of water here. You've got 8 liters of water to work with. So it's unlikely that you will have large clumps at this stage. Okay, I'm happy with that. Back on with the flame. And I'm going to turn it up full because I want to get it back to a boil. So now we're almost there at a boil. Now this is a critical stage. The first time the wort is going to boil with you having added DME, boil over is almost certain. And you can see it coming. The foam is like coming up now. And here you want to be, quick on the draw. So I always watch it like a hawk. And let's see, I'm going to switch off the flame around about now. Yeah. Whew. Okay, that was close. But you don't want that stuff to boil over. It's going to make a mess. It's very sticky, sweet stuff. And so it's going to be a lot of cleanup for you if you let it boil over. And obviously it's somewhat dangerous as well. Now we're going up to a rolling boil. That's the churn. And that is a rolling boil, folks. That is a rolling boil. The whole volume of liquid is turning over. It is not a simmer. This is a violent process. okay? You have to watch it. It's not something which you can just let go. Okay, we're starting the 60-minute now, 60-minute timer. Okay, I want to pause here just for a few seconds to talk a little bit about how we do timekeeping in brewing. So brewers are a bit weird in the sense that we like counting time backwards. It's really quite simple and it's easy to overthink. So when I say a little bit later that you have to add hops at 40 minutes, what am I saying? It's when your timer, which you've started at 60 minutes, reads 40. So an easy way to make sense of this way of keeping time is just to add the words to go at the end of that sentence. So if I say at 40 minutes, add to go, and that's pretty obvious. So with 40 minutes to go before the end of the boil, if I say at 20 minutes or at 15 minutes, it's always to go. So don't overthink it, pretty simple, but useful to know. Let's continue. And our first hop addition is coming up now at 40 minutes. And this is the bittering hops we're going to put in, the Chinook. There we go. Very, very nice hop, the Chinook. This particular addition is really just to bitter out the beer. Very little of the Chinook flavor will remain after having boiled for as long as this will be boiling. Now you want to rehydrate your yeast. Okay, so while the boil is going on, I've got some water in here. I've heated it up a little bit in the microwave, brew water, sterile water, and I want to get the temperature here to around 25 to 30 degrees. Anywhere between those would be fine. And I'm adding my dried yeast. The packet is sterilized, by the way. The scissors I used to open it was also sterilized. Everything which touches this must be sterile. Okay, I'm using my little gram scale. It's a nice little gram scale. I can measure up to a fraction of a gram, and I'm happy with that. 6.1 grams, and you just leave it. Just leave it. This is about 100 mils of water, and you're just gonna leave it to diffuse into the water and to rehydrate on its own. Okay, but you're not going to leave it open because then it means anything can get in there. And at this stage, you want to keep this pretty sterile. So the sterilized lid, which you saw earlier, I'm going to close that up, and I'm just going to put it on the counter. It's going to do its own thing. Okay, back to the boil. You can see how much liquid we've lost. There's the Irish moss. We're going to put it in now. 10 minutes is all you need for it to boil, and that's going to help clarify the beer dramatically. Okay, we're almost there. Our second to last hop addition now, some Cascade at 5 minutes. Now this stuff is just wonderful. I wish you could smell this. It smells like grapefruit. Grapefruits have just sort of appeared in the kitchen. Okay, at the end of the boil, we're going to turn the flame off and we're going to start what is called a whirlpool. Okay, so you're just going to start stirring and stirring and stirring until you start getting what looks like a whirlpool. The whirlpool is something people tend to underestimate. You really do have to create a whirlpool for a couple of minutes. It's not going to work if you just stir for a few seconds. So it's a bit of elbow grease. You've got to keep on stirring and creating that whirlpool, because now we're going to collect the trub. That's all the gunk, all the leftover hops and grains and everything else we don't want in the beer, and it's going to go into the middle. In go the whirlpool hops, so some Chinook and Cascade. Now this Chinook, by the way, unlike the ones we added earlier, will really add to the flavor. And we're talking tropical pine foresty stuff. What I'm going to do now is sample some of the wort with this little milk jug so that we can take a gravity reading. We're going to pop it into our test tube and we're going to do a hydrometer reading. It's a useful idea, by the way, to spin the hydrometer because it sometimes gets stuck to little bubbles on the surface. Let's see what the reading is here. The anticipation is killing me. So at 50 degrees Celsius, we've got 1.054. And because the hydrometer is calibrated for 20, we can adjust it to 0.065. Okay, and there are many different little calculators online. I'll leave a link for one in the description. So 0.65 is a little bit high, and we want to get it down to 0.52 as the recipe suggests. So to dilute with about a liter is what we're going to do. It's off camera, but it's got an added advantage that it's going to also help in chilling the beer a little bit more, because that water we're adding is obviously at room temperature. Or you can even use water which you've kept in the fridge for just this purpose. Of course, needless to say, this is brew water, so also filtered or bottled water, depending on what you're using. Now we've been chilling this wort in my basin. You can see some of those really beautiful blue blocks which you use in the freezer, and all the ice I put in has already melted because it's really been chilling for a while now, about 20 minutes. I'm going to take a reading, so you will see that it's important obviously to sterilize anything touching the wort. I'm happy with that temperature. It's about 29. And now we're going to put it into the sterilized fermenter. I've chucked out all the sterilizing liquid. And you want to do this from a little bit of a height, right? You want to really splash it in there. Let me get out of the light. Man, video is difficult. You want to splash it from a height because you want to introduce oxygen, air, into your wort at this stage only. It's the only time during brewing where you want oxygen in the wort. Anywhere else you want to not have oxygen. Okay, and I think we've got a nice foamy top there, which suggests a nice air absorption into the wort. And you stop pouring as soon as you get to the sort of really green stuff. Now we're going to pitch our yeast. Get it all in there. You don't have to mix it with a spoon or anything, just twirl it around a bit like I'm doing now. But it'll mix itself in no time. So no stirring needed. Okay, I'm going to fit the bubbler into the lid. This is always difficult. That's why I use multiple grommets, or you saw multiple grommets earlier, because it's very likely that you might stuff this up. With the bubbler in, it's time to fill it with some kind of sterile liquid. Normally I use vodka, but some contemptible scoundrel got rid of all my vodka through drinking it. So I'm going to use some sterilizing liquid and just fill it to halfway up the bubbler and pop on the little cap. And that's it. Now we're going to move this fermenter into a relatively temperature stable zone in your house. And this particular beer, the Amber Waves Amber Ale, ferments best at between 16 and 20 degrees Celsius. And fermentation will be complete when you reach a final gravity of anywhere between 008 and 014. Thanks so much for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and I'll see you next time.